Hello again and welcome to College Scotland, Forward to Independence. My name is Dr. Joe Murray and today this podcast is based on a public meeting that Yes Pollok held in the late autumn with some prominent no voters in 2014 referendum who have now become yes voters. They were asked to come along to this open meeting and explain what changed their mind, what made up their journey from no to yes, in the hope that people who are swithering now, who were no voters, but who are not sure how to vote in another referendum, maybe this can help you make that decision. If you're a yes voter, it's still interesting to listen to these people and how they came from no to the yes position. The first person up is Mike Dailly. He's a lawyer at Govan Law Centre. Now, Mike was quite vocal for the no campaign in 2014. Now, he will tell you why he is now a yes voter. Murray Foote was the editor of the Daily Records, and he was the architect of the vow, which swung a lot of voters to the no side at the very end, and convinced a lot of no voters that they were right. Now, Murray will explain to you why he has changed his mind, what made him change his mind, what his journey was from no to yes. The other prominent person is Cat Boyd. Now, Cat, as you know, was a yes voter, but she wasn't always in favour of the independence, but she will explain when and where and why she became an advocate of Scottish independence. They're three very interesting people, and I hope you enjoy listening to their talks. Now, I won't apologise for children at it is a public meeting, so they're a wee bit noisy at times, but just bear with it, because it's worth listening to what these three intelligent and thoughtful people have to say about their journey from no to yes. First up, Mike Dailly.
Thank you very much, Lindsay, for stepping into the breach with Chris. I know Chris has been speaking at the EIS demonstration in George Square, with teachers obviously looking for quite rightly a bigger pay rise of 3%, and I'm completely in agreement with the teachers. I would like to talk about my journey from no to yes, and maybe start off by fessing up. Yes, I've got a sore throat. So if it sounds like I could be a baritone or Kermit the Frog, please forgive me. But also fessing up that yes, I was on the other side, and many people will know or remember, perhaps not fondly, but yes, I was on the other side back in 2014. So I want to talk about some practical issues, but I think most importantly, talk about no to yes, but really I think what the ambition should be for Scotland in the future. Because for me, the heart of winning a new referendum will be what is the vision for Scotland. It's not about a process, it's not about anything other than it has to make people's lives better, and not just a wee bit better. So where to start? Do a little bit of history. Going back to the beginning, when I attended the Whitfield Labour Club as a bairn on the East Coast. I was brought up in Whitfield, which is a scheme in the northeast of the city, not that dissimilar to Pollok, in fact probably very similar, and joined the Labour Party at age 16 in Dundee Seagate with the anointment from the not so gorgeous George, who was the secretary back then. I watched the steady decline and the brutal decline of my working class community from 1979 with Thatcher. Through the 1980s, when long-term unemployment became so common for so many people. And what I saw was that good, hard-working people that were my neighbours, that were my friends, lost their dignity when they lost their job, became long-term unemployed. And what then happens is the communities become broken. And that's the story so much in so many parts of Scotland and indeed across the UK. So for me, I got into politics first at university at Strathclyde. Because I saw that as a way to try and change things, and then got into law, because I realised actually law doesn't matter. Law is a force that can be a force for good as well as a force for bad. And at that time, my vehicle for social change was the Labour Party at that age. In my double law centre role, which I kicked off from 1989, I've always been really happy to work with anybody who wants to do the things that I think and my management committee from the local community government think are things that need to happen to benefit local people. So back in the day, I drafted the Abolition of Printed Word Sales Bill, the Free School and Healthy Meals Bill, the Prevention of Homelessness Bill, and I worked with a range of people from the SNP, from Labour, the Lib Dems. I was happy to work with anybody. But if we're honest, and we think back to the success that Tony Blair had in 1987, in that general election, it ended 18 years of Tory rule, and we were all absolutely delighted, I know I was, to see the back of the Tories. But in truth, Blairism wasn't really progressive or radical. Sure, it did some good things. I think the tax credit system is an incredibly good thing. But if we're honest, the legacy from Blairism is really a kind of a neoliberal version of Thatcherism. Privatisation, hollow soundbites, and really bad things. Okay, we set up the welfare state after the Second World War in 1945. But it's been a long, long time since Labour's done anything really radical. The Tories introduced austerity politics in 2010. And for me, Labour, and this is my frustration starts very much from then, Labour become the midwife to austerity by abstaining, by not voting against. And for me, that's when I really started to have serious and major doubts. I suppose another big thing for me is that for 30 years of my life, the Tories have been in power at Westminster. And even when we've had a Labour government, it's kind of been, let's talk big and let's deliver little. And I think the arrogance, for me, with Scottish Labour in the last number of years in Scotland, and obviously being almost wiped out in 2015 in the general election. Now, if you look at current polls, Labour is either neck and neck with the Tories or behind, which is quite incredible if you think about the worst Tory government in my memory, and yet Labour is still trailing or, at best, equal. There's no way that Labour's going to win. I think if there was a general election tomorrow, a UK general election, I think the SNP would gain MPs in Scotland. I've no doubt about that. And Ruth Davidson has monopolised this in Scotland. She's literally, for me, a soundbite. She talks against things. There's no policies, there's nothing of substance. And of course, you can only survive in a vacuum for so long. But the Tories have gained that in Scotland by just being against what Yes are talking about. It's quite incredible. But for the turning point, I think, for me, moving from no to yes, was the realisation that Scotland has diverged and is diverging more each day from the rest of the UK. So let me just explain that while my voice tries to hold up, which is unusual for me because I'm normally talking a lot. So, the 1940 social contract that bound the UK together was a convergence on a common welfare state, the NHS. But that's now broken down. The NHS has been privatised in England. The bulk of England wants to cut itself adrift from Europe, even if it's going to cause major economic damage. So the realisation that we'll never achieve anything progressive and fair within the UK. And for me, basically, ultimately, it took a long time, you may say, but that's okay, realising that the seesaw politics between the Tories and Labour throughout my life has actually failed many, many generations. Now, I met Jeremy Corbyn when he was in Postle Park a few weeks ago, and I have to tell you, he's a very nice guy. And I've no doubt that he's a socialist, and I've no doubt that he wants to do good things, and I've no question in that regard. I quite like the guy. But his party's imploding every week. It is a party that is an absolute mess. They'll never deliver any aspirations that he may have. So for me, and I'm a bit of a pragmatist, for me, the only way to deliver progressive change in Scotland, the kind that we've seen in the Scottish Parliament since '99, is to have independence and control our own destiny and future. So I'm convinced about that, to do things differently. Devolution has given us a glimpse of how we can do those things differently. And I am now convinced that that's the only way we can go forward. So the challenge is to persuade those that voted no like myself in 2014 to vote yes. Realise that the promises that were told in 2014 came to nothing. No offence, Murray. I've never seen Murray's a Dundee from Lockheed. I've never said a bad word about him. It's a Dundee thing. We're basically sitting at a precipice, and of course with Brexit, and Labour have been sitting on that Brexit fence, and I find that absolutely heartbreaking. Why are they sitting on that fence? Because they don't want to upset reactionary Brexiteers. They want their shot at power. So what you do is you say you don't want to upset all these people in Middle England. And that just, I think, compounds and confirms exactly what my concerns are. So just over a year ago, the Scottish Parliament voted for a second Scottish independence referendum. But the Prime Minister said, no, you can't have one. We all know what Brexit means. As we approach that point in time at the end of March next year, we're heading to a no deal. And that means that we're going to be alienated from 500 million people in Europe. Brexiteers are giving us an idiocracy. I mean, when you watch what's happening in this country, and you watch what's happening over in the US, you sometimes just think we're living in a matrix-like dream. It's incredible that people are buffoons that are monstrously unethical and despicable. It's incredible that these people are in power. I think the Prime Minister's refusal to give Scotland our next referendum, if it continues, it's going to create a constitutional crisis. So I think we need to use our existing mandate, because we have one, to make sure that we have another independence referendum, and I think that has to be announced soon. And I know that the First Minister has said that once the EU position is crystallised later this year, that may be the time that she's got something to say. So when we voted in September 2014, as I said, I've spoken at lots of public meetings for the No campaign. Kat will remember one or two. And back then, the clear message was that if you voted no, we will be able to retain our EU membership. Now that's just not true. 62% of people in this country voted to remain in the EU. And so for me, the new constitutional arrangement from next March is a game changer. What it does is it provides a legal, a political and a moral case for a new independence referendum. And that's why I'm absolutely committed to have that referendum. See, leaving the EU affects everyone. It takes away your EU citizenship. It's not just a wee thing, it's a major thing. And we're starting to see that. I think it's the most important constitutional change in my lifetime. If we were an independent nation, we could join EFTA, or we could join the European Economic Area, like Iceland, Norway, Switzerland, or Liechtenstein. That's a good thing. That could be done reasonably quickly. That would protect the interests of Scotland and enable us to develop our future. It would open up trade to 500 million people. So for me, Scotland has got two futures ahead of it. We've got one future which is benefit sanctions, and I see that day to day in my job, and it's absolutely unbelievable what's happened to people. We've got a future of Victorian values, austerity, more austerity, greater inequality, and punishing people for no other reason that they're poor or low paid. The Human Rights Act come the end of next March. The Tories won't abolish that. I've already committed to saying they're going to abolish the Human Rights Act. And what that means, and I use the Human Rights Act in courts in Scotland every single day. It protects people. It's a very powerful thing. If you don't have it, it means you've got the European Convention on Human Rights, which the UK is a signatory to. But it's not worth the paper it's written on, because you can't enforce it in a domestic court in this country. You would have to go to the European Court of Human Rights in Europe. So, are we going to have a steady decline come next March, with another 15 to 20 years of conservatism, with the Tories in power at Westminster, kind of like a rerun of the 1980s, and that disparity in terms of inequality? Or are we going to have a completely different future, a future of our own? And I know what future I would like to choose. And here's just some very quick thoughts that I'll end on. We can choose, with independence, to have a future where we eradicate rough sleeping and homelessness. I believe that we can do that. I've certainly been involved in some of that work, and it can happen. We can have a Scotland that doesn't need food banks. I mean, the rise of food banks has been quite an extraordinary thing to see happen. But we need to have the economic levers and control of social security law, not just a little bit, but the whole lot, to make that happen, radically make a difference. Every child should have the best education. Often we talk about that, it's just like a mantra, but we need to make it happen. And we need to hold, in an independent Scotland, the government that's then elected to account to make these things happen. Because for me, there's no point having independence if we're not going to tackle the injustice, social and immoral injustices that we have. We need to invest in our infrastructure, homes, transport, energy, And we need to get rid of the gig economy. And for the people that say to me, like when you talk about getting rid of zero-hour contracts, you know, that really benefits students because it gives them flexibility. That's just garbage. People don't know how they can pay their rent because they don't know how many hours they get the next week. The gig economy is not for the flexible benefit of students. That is a monstrous lie. It's for the benefit of employers. And my idea is if you want to live in a society where people basically obey the law, the price to pay for obeying the law is this social contract with people, which is you give them a minimum amount to live on which is decent, you give them a house, and you give them things that they need, i.e. rights, legal rights. Payment when you're off sick, holiday pay. Just very quickly, when the Tories introduced fees for employment tribunals, do you know that there was a 70% reduction in claims for unfair dismissal and discrimination, sex harassment, disability discrimination? 70%, because nobody could afford the fees. Now, thanks to trade unions, that's now gone. There are no fees now. And there's now been a massive surge. See, this is what I'm talking about. These things are important. I don't think people that are disabled in Scotland should be financially penalised. People that are disabled in this country have to pay for non-residential care out of their social security. I think that's wrong. I think social security was originally designed because it's more expensive to live if you have a disability. And finally, I want to see a Scotland where people that are vulnerable have got meaningful access to justice. Because there's no point giving people rights if they can't enforce those rights and have access to getting a result that will make a difference. So that's why I've changed from no to yes. Thank you very much.
And that was Mike Dailly talking about his journey from no to yes for an independent Scotland. I'd also like to thank Lindsay Wilson, who did a lot to organise the whole event and was MC for the first part of the event as Chris Stevens MP had been held up at a demonstration in town for teachers' rights. The next speaker is Cat Boyd, a Scottish trade union activist, and was one of the co-founders of the Radical Independence campaign during the last referendum, 2014 referendum. She was a prominent figure then, but as I said earlier, her journey from no to yes started on her 18th birthday and has continued to this day. So, Cat Boyd.
So I just want to start talking about my journey to yes, because that actually began about 15 years ago. It was the days after my 18th birthday where I watched on a little TV in Hamilton, my mum and dad's house, the skies in Baghdad lighting up orange with bombs. Bombs that were dropped as part of the illegal invasion against Iraq. And it was during that time that myself and many of my friends for independence, because we felt ashamed to be associated with the British state, with our politicians playing lapdogs to American power. We watched young working class people sent off to die in an illegal war that was about oil. But I didn't begin to campaign for independence until around 5 years ago, when myself and a handful of other young people in Glasgow, there was about 10 of us, we established the Radical Independence campaign. And I kind of want to go back to the start of that campaign, because I remember the office that we set it up in, just above Central Station in town. And once we launched that campaign, I'll be honest, we got a lot of flack for it. We had a lot of criticism for starting Radical Independence, because there were people who were already convinced by independence who questioned us. Why didn't we just join Yes Scotland and campaign with them? Some said that we were an MI5 front, secretly funded by the Labour Party. People on the old left said that we had capitulated to nationalism, and Labour activists spread the word that we were funded by Brian Souter. We got lots and lots of flack, lots of relentless trolling, so much so that sometimes I would wake up in the morning and think, what the hell am I doing with my life? So why did we go for it, with the odds stacked against us, with no resources, no money, no staff, no premises, with so many people they were telling us that we were mad and that they knew better. The reason we went ahead with it is that we wanted to be bold and challenge the way that politics had been for so many of us for so long. And we wanted to challenge the mainstream on things like child poverty and pensioner poverty. The radical history of Scotland, the UCS, Clyde shipyards working, the poll tax movement, they were not their property, they belonged to the people of Scotland. We dared, and in some ways we succeeded, because from the 10 people who started that campaign, by the time we did our conference in November 2014, we had an audience of 3,500 people. And I want to say, we didn't succeed in building that because we were smart. That is not the case. We succeeded just because the ideas that we were talking about, their time had come. And one of those key ideas, people laughed at us at the time. I remember reading certain newspapers where people made fun of us for being young and being radical. At the time I had bright red hair, and that probably didn't help matters either. But we made one particular argument, which the tide of that argument was then, and now it is everywhere. We said very, very clearly, Britain is broken. The system is broken. Britain is in crisis. Now, everyone laughed at us at the time, and I'm not here to say we told you so, but if you pick up The Guardian, or you pick up The Telegraph, or you pick up the Financial Times, you pick up the Daily Mail, every single one of those newspapers now, they admit that Britain is broken and it is pretty much unfixable. And here's a wee thought experiment that I hope you'll indulge me in. That just for a second, forget you support independence, right? Forget you've got any moral compass. Just forget you're interested in social justice or political change or anything, just for 1 second. And take a deep breath. And imagine that you are a Tory party advisor. Out of all possible outcomes in the next 6 months, which one for the British state? Now, I try this exercise all the time. I do it on my way to work, I do it when I'm on the bus, I did it on my way here. Every time I do it, every scenario seems less plausible and less desirable than the last. So, let's imagine that the EU capitulates and agrees to Theresa May's terms on Brexit. What then? She's got to win the DUP, the Brexiteers and the free market liberals within her party, which is almost impossible. Or she's got to win another party to her vision, which seems even less likely. Or maybe she ignores Parliament and triggers a constitutional crisis. And that's before we even begin to consider the consequences of her deal. Is it a hard border in Ireland or a new border across the Irish Sea? Every ingenious solution brings with it at least 5 new problems. Maybe Theresa May will capitulate to the Brexiteers, or even maybe resign in favour of one of them. Let Boris Johnson negotiate his mad Canada-style deal. But they'd never get the deal through Parliament, and that's just the start. Because the Tories, let's remember, are the party of the business class. They are the party of the ruling elite. And the British business establishment at the end of the day wants the softest possible Brexit, or no Brexit at all. Boris Johnson has it really easy, out on the fringes, being a lone lunatic, making wild comments in his newspaper columns, but how is he going to sell that vision to the hedge fund managers who actually run Britain? Another option. Maybe there's a referendum on the deal, bypassing the deadlock in Parliament. But what happens if people vote against the deal? Does that mean no deal Brexit? Does it mean we're rejoining the EU? Is it back to the negotiating table and then another referendum on another deal? Any outcome in that scenario will leave tens of millions of people feeling cheated and violated. Or maybe we just overthrow Brexit, either through Parliament or through another Remain-Leave referendum. And for the Conservatives, this has one major advantage. It keeps their financial backers in the City of London delighted. But this doesn't solve anything about the legitimacy crisis of the British state. It would make everything worse. Britain, going back into the EU, broken and humiliated, with no opt-outs and and no room to negotiate. And by the way, the right-wing populists like Nigel Farage know this. They would say that a democratic referendum, the will of the people, had been overthrown, and they're not going to go away. They will hang around the British state, they will cause chaos, and they will build their right-wing project until there's another referendum for Brexit Mark II. At minimum, 40% of Britain will support them. And as for Labour, well, Labour are asking for a general election. To pretend that's even possible, you've got to imagine Tory MPs voting for it in massive numbers. And are the Tories really going to vote for the possibility of a Brexit negotiated by Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell? After Theresa May's electoral disaster in 2017, the Tories will only vote for that if there's a cast-iron guarantee of a blue majority, and let's face it, that's never going to happen. So finally, let's imagine somehow Britain finds a magic solution. It doesn't satisfy anyone, far less makes everyone happy, but it's enough to just muddle through. It quietens the DUP, the Brexiteers, the Liberal Remainers, and all the other factions. It seems impossible right now, but let's just imagine it for the sake of argument. Even if that happens, Britain as a project is dead. Nobody even bothers to deny this anymore. Devolution has been abandoned. Scotland has been running without a government since January 2017. Polls now show emerging support for Irish reunification. The UK government, and this is the point that really sticks with me, the UK government is negotiating Brexit on the goodwill of the DUP, a faction of religious extremists who, even if they did stand for every Protestant in Ulster, represent less than 1 million people. The Scottish Government, and indeed all parties in Scotland representing over 5 million people, have been cast aside. When Brexit, when the big decisions are to be made, our institutions, our parliament, our people are shut out like toddlers having a tantrum. We are cast out of those big decisions. And this is the challenge for our movement today. I assume that most people in the room are already convinced by Yes. I presume that most people here, unlike myself, didn't vote for Labour at the last general election. But this is part of the problem, because for our movement, we look at Labour in Scotland and we see them crushed and defeated. They're nowhere, even with someone who's left wing at the helm. The polls for Labour are still going down. But for our movement, for the independence movement, it's not enough just to see the Labour Party crushed and humiliated, because we're not just a movement that demands retribution against the Labour Party. Labour's problem in Scotland is that they serve the rich and the middle class, and they forgot about the poor majority, and that problem's not gone away. Let's not quibble like we did during the last independence referendum, whether Scotland is the 7th richest country, or the 14th richest country, or the 30th richest country in the developed world. Let's be sensible. Compared to our grandparents' generation, we are swimming in potential wealth. And we have elected SNP councillors to Glasgow City. We have elected pro-independence politicians to our own parliament. And we have elected SNP MPs to Westminster. And still, we still see Victorian poverty on our streets. We are still cutting investment. We still see children who are born in one half of the city of Glasgow expected to live less than children born in the other parts. We can call it injustice if you want. I call it theft. That simply by being born in a particular postcode in Scotland, you lose decades of your life. That problem has not disappeared with Labour. It hasn't been made better by sending SNP MPs to Westminster. It hasn't been made better by having nationalists in power in Blue. I fought for independence during the last campaign, and I'm still campaigning for independence today. Because how can the British state ever have legitimacy again? Because they lied over Iraq, and 1 million people died, and we left the Middle East in tatters. They lied about austerity, which left democracy in our communities shattered. And one half of the establishment lied to win a Brexit referendum, enraging 48% of Britain. Now the other half are using Project Fear tactics to overthrow the result, which will enrage the other 52%. This isn't about who is right and who is wrong. The whole system is broken. The argument we made in 2014 about Britain is one. Nobody denies that Britain is broken. And as for our imagined Tory party advisor, they know that there is a solution to the crisis, and that the seeds of that solution are being grown in halls like this. Yes groups, radical independence groups all across Scotland are beginning to campaign. We're beginning to set out our stall for another referendum, because the solution to the crisis is not to ask people to vote again on the EU referendum. It's not even to have another general election. The only solution to the crisis of the British state is another referendum on Scottish independence. And this time round, we can be sure that we will win it.
The next speaker is Murray Foote. Murray Foote, like Mike Dailly, is a proud Dundonian, and like many Dundonians before him, he became a journalist. Murray Foote was, during the last referendum, the editor of the Daily Record and was the architect of the vow. Murray started his journey from no to yes after the no vote in 2014, and he will explain that to you now. Murray Foote.
Murray Foote, thank you. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for the invite, although I can't quite shake the feeling that I'm here under false pretences. Don't worry, I've not changed my mind on independence. But as you know, today's theme is from no to yes. My previous job was editor of the Daily Record, and I commissioned the vow. Guilty. So you might believe I was a card-carrying unionist. Truth is, I've always supported the principle of Scottish independence. To those who know me, my recent declaration came as no surprise. Like Mr Daly here, I was born and bred in Dundee, the city where 57% voted yes in 2014, and I now consider myself an adopted son of Glasgow, the city where more than 53% voted yes. So why am I here and what's changed? Like many Scots in 2014, I was struggling with a conflict between my heart and my head. My heart was unequivocally yes, my head was less convinced. In the weeks before the vote, my job as record editor was to provide a platform to discuss the arguments being made by both campaigns. And yes, greater scrutiny was brought to bear on those advocating independence. You may think that's unfair, but up to a point it's justifiable. The no camp were, until the last few days anyway, simply advocating the status quo. It was an arrangement everyone was familiar with. If we voted no, we already knew the script. On the other side, Yes Scotland was asking the country to take a bit of a leap of faith. Because of that, their prospectus was interrogated to a greater degree. That's not to say some of the promises made by the no camp were given too easy a ride. With hindsight, clearly concede that they were. For many undecided Scots, the biggest question mark then, and it remains the biggest question now, was over the funding of our country's public services. The much discussed Scottish Government White Paper, Scotland's Future, contained barely enough a but or a maybe about the financial challenges that would come with independence. When amongst other unknowns, the chunky part of your income is dependent on a volatile commodity like oil, there really ought to have been a few more ifs and buts. That lack of candour rang alarm bells for many undecided voters. If Yes Scotland was not being transparent on a critical issue like the economy, what else were they not being entirely truthful about? Call it Project Fear, call it what you will. But I believe that nagging doubt was the deciding factor in the 2014 result. Not surprisingly, I don't believe it was the vow, although I'm sure you'll challenge me on that in a minute or two. Regardless, we all know the outcome of the vote. Since then, I've watched in despair as events in Westminster have unfolded. The ties that bind Scotland, England, Ireland and Wales have always been subject to stresses and strains. But after 4 short years, I'm appalled at what Britain has become. The source of my growing despair has been a roll call of dishonour, the hostile environment policy, Windrush, the unending misery of austerity, an increasingly vindictive benefits regime that persecutes the sick and strips the vulnerable of all dignity. The list goes on, and they all have one thing in common. Not one of them needed to happen. There were better alternatives to them all. Unbelievably, these are policies that the Westminster government actively chose, or at least they created the culture that brought them about. And now we come to Brexit. I cannot overestimate I fear that this self-inflicted wound will cause untold damage both in the short term and on future generations. Again, the decision to leave the EU is a choice, but it's not Scotland's choice. Despite having voted against it, Scotland alone is powerless to stop it. Our 300-year union is a failed marriage. I can't decide if it fizzled out simply through neglect, or if it was doomed by an increasingly selfish and abusive partner. Perhaps it was both. But either way, divorce is in the post. And that's not wishful thinking. I believe it's a certainty. Because the desire to split is no longer coming from just one partner. According to a recent opinion poll, the English Unionists were asked if Brexit would mean Scottish independence. A substantial majority chose Brexit. When asked if Brexit would lead to United Ireland, again, they chose Brexit. England's head has been turned by its lust for Brexit. And the irony should not be lost on us. After years of Scotland agonising over our future relationship, it's England that's now packing its bags. From my perspective, England and Westminster never felt more far away or more detached from Scotland, its people and its needs. Not only are our expressed wishes on key issues like immigration being ignored, they're being treated as an inconvenience, sidelined by the all-consuming internal battles of a paralysed Tory party. The Union of Great Britain managed to muddle through for 3 centuries, partly because Scots played a key role in shaping government policy. They may have often failed, but at least they tried to meet the varying needs of 4 different countries. Nowadays, I'm struck by the lack of sympathetic Scottish voices on government and opposition benches. Like them or loathe them, but where are the John Smiths, Robin Cooks, Donald Dewars and, dare I say it, Gordon Browns? Instead, we have Michael Gove, Liam Fox and David Mundell, and none of them talk for me. Yes, there are plenty of voices on the SNP benches, sitting alongside Chris, but as we know, to our righteous indignation, too often they're denied the opportunity to speak on our behalf. The principles of representative democracy and of devolution are no longer honoured at Westminster. Ultimately, it's why I felt compelled to publicly declare my support for independence. I can no longer stay silent while a clique of cabinet millionaires deprive our children of the right to live in any one of 27 European countries. I can no longer stay silent while the same craving cabal undermine the stability of a continent that has largely been at peace for 70 years. I can no longer wait for enough English voters to recognise the manifest failings of a Tory party that cares only for the privileged elite and will never govern for the benefit of all. And I can no longer watch a Labour Party pursue their own destructive Brexit ideology, full in the knowledge that the people they profess to represent will shoulder the greatest burden. I'm not conceited enough to believe my personal declaration would change minds. At best, it's merely symbolic of what I perceive as a shift in the thinking of many soft no voters. But it was important to me to be truthful, to correct a misconception about my beliefs. In the 4 years since 2014, numerous negative forces have tugged my head and my heart ever closer to alignment. Earlier this year, the SNP's Growth Commission gave my head that final nudge. Not because it provides a magic bullet, it doesn't. To appreciate the work of the Growth Commission, you don't even need to agree with all of its recommendations. But for me, the report has 2 precious attributes. First, it has an intrinsic honesty. It recognises independence would hurdle financial challenges if we are to maintain current levels of public spending, and that's the starting point for an honest debate. And that honesty reassures me. I believe it will reassure others too. Second, it is undoubtedly ambitious. It is fully committed to meeting these economic challenges and finding ways to overcome them. For me, independence is about autonomy, about allowing Scotland to meet success and failure on its own merit and not point the bitter finger of blame at anyone else. I have reconciled that independence would hurtle good and bad, but crucially, I trust the country to solve the problems that will doubtless come our way. If other countries can, it is inconceivable that Scotland can. The difficult decisions we would face and the sacrifices we may need to make do trouble me. We must get these difficult decisions right. But what troubles me more is the dread prospect of bequeathing to my daughters an isolated Britain governed indefinitely by the likes of Boris Johnson, Jacob Rees-Mogg, or the Bampot apprentice Ross Thompson. When in 1999 Donald Dewar reconvened the Scottish Parliament after a 300-year recess, he said, "A Scottish Parliament, not an end, a means to greater end." Devolution brought the biggest political change of my lifetime, but independence is now the only option that provides the prospect of Dewar's greater end. Holyrood cannot exist merely to clean up the mess created by callous Tory policies at Westminster. It's an insult to suggest it should. Renfrewshire South MSP Tom Arthur captured the absurdity of that view in a brilliantly passionate speech in Holyrood on Wednesday. We owe it to ourselves and to future generations to be far more progressive, dynamic and ambitious. So, 45% support in 2014, how do we complete the journey to independence? I have two observations. The first is blindingly obvious and shouldn't need saying. Sadly it doesn't, it's crucial. Stop abusing undecided or no voters. Do not tolerate it. If you see it, stamp on it. It's neither a good look nor a winning strategy. Remember, they are our fellow Scots who simply don't agree with us yet. We need them to walk with us to complete that journey, and abuse will not convert a single soul. If we're selling the vision of a more fair, a more equal Scotland, trading insults will not paint an enticing picture. I accept that may well be difficult in the face of provocation when the other side won't play nice, but abuse does not alter views, it entrenches them. Instead, persuade by the strength of your arguments, not by the depth of your frustration and anger. That brings me to the second observation. We know Scotland is a country of incredible natural resources with a population renowned for resilience and ingenuity. We already have the building blocks to create a successful independent nation. But that doesn't mean there will be no bumps in the road. And like the Growth Commission, we must be prepared to admit there will be bumps. So I offer these three words of guidance. Relentless, honest, optimism. Whatever your argument you're making, be relentlessly honest and relentlessly optimistic. People want to believe in a better future. They want to believe this is not as good as it gets. But they need to be convinced your way is the right way. And they can be convinced with relentless, honest optimism. 20 years ago, Donald Duer's speech also pointed out woven into the thistles of the Scottish Parliament mace are four words: wisdom, justice, compassion, integrity. They're not just words, they're noble ideals to which Scotland aspires, and they can be achieved through hard work, ambition, ingenuity, and yes, independence.
And that was Murray Foote talking about his journey from no to yes. And for someone as erudite as Murray Foote, Mike Dailly and Catboy to be talking to you about this is something worth taking on board. I would like to thank Yes Pollok for hosting the public event to allow people to come along and hear people like Mike, Cat and Murray talk about what it was that changed their minds. If you live in the Pollok area, if you wish to join any of the Yes groups, look online. Facebook's a great place to get in contact with groups like that, Radical Independence and various others. But Yes Pollok is a local group, one which I am involved in, and I would like to thank again Chris Stevens MP and Lindsay Wilson in particular for hosting the event. You don't hear them much on the tape because we're limited to time, of course, but I would like to thank them for all the hard work that they put into that, for Chris in particular for turning up and emceeing it. Eventually you had to attend a meeting before that, a demonstration before that for the EIS, which is important to him because Chris has like Catboy, has a union background, that's trades union. So thank them for what they've done, and thank you for listening, and until next time, Alapa Gubra.